Hey everybody, welcome back to the Operational Reset podcast. I'm your host, Joe Swanson. And look, as always, this is brought to you by Tactical Resilience, my workshop. And at the heart of that workshop is ORSM, the Operational Reset Stack Method. This is a stack-based human performance system that you can use across everything you're doing in law enforcement. If you're interested in that, go to joeswansontactical.com. Hit me up on Instagram at Joe Swanson Tactical for more information, and I'll send you a couple resources that have 3 stacks that you can start using right away. I'm super excited to welcome my guest here. This is now the second time I've welcomed her to the podcast because the first time we had internet problems and we had to reschedule. And so I got back home from my California trip and got settled. Katie, I got sick first, and then I got settled. There's a wild story between leaving California and getting back to Colorado where we lost our car. We're on the side of the road for like 3 hours. It was wild, but I'm so happy to have you on. This is Katie Carlson, my guest. She's the Director of Wellness for Marion County Sheriff's Office. And this is a department of about 1,000 staff. And so she serves not only the deputies, but also some of the other folks there. And I'm excited to bring her on because, Katie, I have to say, like, since we connected on LinkedIn, you're one of those folks that I consistently see posts that are not only encouraging, thoughtful, provoking, right? Table flipping, to coin the term that you brought in on one of your posts. Which I think was a great analogy. And it's just refreshing to see somebody so passionate about what they're doing. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm glad that you made it back from California. I didn't realize there was so much trouble getting back, but I'm so honored to be here.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we were driving back. We left, got up into Tahoe, got pulled off because of chain requirements. And I had a little 2012 Prius. I love that car. It's brought me back and forth across the country many, many times. So we got chains, got back on the road, got through that. And then like 13 miles outside of Reno, the whole dashboard lights up.
Oh, no.
And we're like, oh no, this is not good, right? That's like 4th of July on this trip here. So we actually coasted off because it lost power to the car.
Wow.
And then we coast off. We're at the side of the road. I shut the car off, turn it back on, and like no power. I'm just like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? So we end up calling a tow. 3 hours later, the tow comes. So we were on the side of the road for about 3 hours hanging. Car's whole engine was blown, and so we left the car in Reno and got an Airbnb for the night, left, and with a rental, but we made it back safe, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, man, in 2012, if people ever think I'm hard on the wellness industry, you should hear my thoughts about the automotive industry. As a product of it, my grandpa was a chemist for GM. Man, cars just are falling apart like nothing. I mean 2012 is pretty long, but like still.
Yeah, and it had like 237,000 miles on it. I kept it serviced, but I had definitely put, even just in the last 2 years, like probably a half a dozen or more trips to California and back. Not to mention going the other way and up to Minnesota and all these different places. So, man, I loved that car. It was amazing. I'm a Toyota guy like now because of it. It gave me a lot of good memories. So
yeah,
but it's gone.
I had a brand new car a little while ago, and then as I was leaving an Indiana Law Enforcement Academy graduation and on my way down to Nashville, Tennessee to present the next morning, I got in a collision I mean, I got injured, and my car was totaled. And the silver lining is that my dream car had always been like a Lincoln, and so I was able to. I took the insurance money and bought a 2016 Lincoln that. So
Nice.
I ended up in my dream car. Back especially when they first kind of came on the market, and I really liked it. So
Dude, awesome. This is great. I love to hear it when those challenges in life turn into a better opportunity,
yeah.
right?
Well, and
It's so good.
Lincoln's definitely one of my historical crushes too. And there's its logo is the North Star, and so I just kind of feel
Yeah.
totally, aligned with it. It worked out well.
I love it. I always loved the Lincolns that were, I think they're from the 70s that have the suicide doors on the back.
Hmm.
Like those are always one of my favorites. What drew you to Lincolns?
Matthew McConaughey.
Okay, yeah, the Lincoln lawyer. I love it.
Just got such
Amazing.
cool commercials, and I just liked the car, and it's just always so beautiful. And it was one of those things that you think back then, like, oh, when I have more money, when I'm more successful, because when you're working in government, you don't have that much money, and I'm still working in government, and I still don't have that much money, but still ended up with my dream car, so I'm
It
pretty
came back
happy.
around. Amazing. Yeah. Talk a little bit about that. Like, you started off in government doing like, tell us a little bit about like what you started doing. And then I want to get into that transition because I think it's super interesting, the transition to what you did for Marion County first,
Yeah.
and then how it translates into what you're doing now.
Yeah. So, my background actually was in politics before I ever started working for the sheriff's office. And, at its heart, all I ever really wanted to do was make a difference and help people. I was a very, idealistic and hardworking young woman. Um, then when I ended up at the sheriff's office, it was a horrible, horrible year. I mean, 2012, I was unemployed 3 times. I had 3 different jobs.
Wow.
Went through a divorce. I struggled with housing insecurity and even more that I won't mention. And but I like to say that I landed on my feet because I started at the sheriff's office in December of that year. It obviously has worked out pretty well. That's been over 13 years ago. And
Yeah.
I started in this role. It just so happened that the older gentleman that had been the public information officer had retired and gone to a part-time basis, and the young man who'd been doing all of the social media had been moved to another division. And so they kind of stuck those 2 jobs together. I was able to start, and I just fell in love instantly. And so I more than anything, I fell in love with the people who were doing this work. They were just so different than anyone who I'd really been exposed to prior to that.
Yeah.
Just such different hearts and souls for the job. So kind to me. I mean, like if I look at my old journal entries, which I just was rereading some of these the other day, I would stay even almost a year in. I was like, I can't believe how nice these people are to me. I can't believe how kind these people are to me. And so I was really in awe of the people. I loved the opportunity, and I was in awe of all of the stuff they were doing. I had this really behind the scenes kind of job, and I got to go on, I'd do ride-alongs with pretty much every division in our unit. And of course, every time something bad would happen, I would be dealing with that also with the media. And so, really kind of got just a really interesting background. And I did that for 8.5 years. And so what I like to say is that I went from telling the story of the sheriff's office to the outside to kind of telling the story of what happens to the people that do this work from the inside. Obviously, I do a lot of writing. You've already mentioned that. And so, there's not, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately, there's nothing necessarily that I do that makes me like better than, this other program or, more advanced. Like there's a lot of people doing a lot of amazing things in this field who have access
Yes.
to a lot of programming and support that we just don't have access to at our agency. But I talk about it a lot. And I know that there are so many agencies who are behind us who are trying to figure out the way. So I'm never trying to say, oh my gosh, we're the best, we're the brightest, we've got everything right. It's like, if you're trying to make a difference here, like these are some of the things that I've run into, and the telling the story, understand, helping people understand the trauma of the job and the impact of the job, and how that has an effect not just on these people who I came to love so dearly, but then also the community. It's just something that people need to be able to understand, and when we know better, we do better. And so some of my friends say, awareness is kind of overplayed in wellness, and I don't disagree, but I think with the general population, still helping them to be able to understand the real toll that this takes on really good people is important. And so I'm just really grateful to be able to tell that story.
Yeah, it's so important. I love a couple things that you said there. And it's the first thing that really strikes me was like the people and how kind they were. And, you know, I think that's such a stark contrast to what the general public oftentimes views law enforcement as. It's that person that gave me that ticket. It's that
Mhm.
person that is looking for me doing something wrong, as opposed to that's a salt of the earth person that's kind and probably got into the job to protect and serve and wants to be helping, not
Mhm.
necessarily um, causing the worst day of your
Mhm.
experience, but being there to support you in that worst day. Um, and I think it's so important to keep that story going, that people understand that. General public understands that, like, these are just regular folks, right? There's nothing
Beyond
like,
regular, they'd take a bullet for somebody. Like just such good people. Better, like, I mean, it's amazing.
yeah. And I think like the other thing that hits me is, obviously, because I'm in this space too, I'm doing work to try to, out from wisdom of experience of what happened to me as a law enforcement officer working for two different departments, as a state trooper and as a police officer, um, what that cumulative trauma did. And I didn't even understand what was happening. Um, and so to share with tools with folks who can affect their experience, can take control back of that experience. Um, and just what you said about the cumulative trauma and what it does to law enforcement professionals and the cursory staff that helps them as well.
Mhm. Yeah, well, and nothing reinforces that, especially like the work that I do at the academy level. And I know that's something that we both are passionate about. But I mean, it's like you can't tell me in these academies, I mean, these people that I just adore. I mean, they are so amazing going into there, and there's nothing to be mad about them yet. There isn't anything they've done, and so you see their hearts for service, and you know that, and you also, when you work in law enforcement long enough, you see the changes that happen in people. You see the changes that have happened in yourself. I've had a very long and significant trauma journey for myself, and parts of that were related to working in public safety. I mean, I already had a lot of trauma coming into this job, and then all of a sudden, 10 different news agencies, I'm the one sole contact, 300 people in a jail, 1,000 staff, in a pretty large city. Like it was, and no coverage. No one was able to help me get off. I went about 5 years, the first 5 years of working here, basically without ever taking a vacation. And So that fry that happens on top of it, and that's not even, not even related to the horrible trauma. That's just the kind of the fry.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's really people need to understand it and expect it going into that. And we have to stop making these things a surprise. Like, oh, I mean,
Yeah.
it's happened to everybody, but we're going to just let you slowly figure it out on your own.
Yeah, I was at a community meeting. So I went in a town local to me. I saw that my mom had signed up for this community policing meeting. And I was like, Mom, are you thinking of going to this? And she's like, yeah, just thought it might be interesting. And I'm like, well, I'm going to come. Let's have let's go together. So we went to this meeting, and I think it's interesting to hear uh, the public sort of perception, and then we got to hear from the PIO, the community police unit as well, and so there's an interesting dichotomy there that like what the public views things as, and then the these units that are talking to them saying, well, we have to consider these things. And I think the more that gap can be closed through communication, the better.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And the more that people can understand, the more that law enforcement officers can understand about trauma. I mean, there's so many people in the community who have, just had faced so much disparity and issues. So, it's helpful when we can all kind of be on the same page. I was talking to a firefighter yesterday, and it's a conversation that's come up in several conversations recently. But, I think it's important for people to understand in law enforcement wellness, really, some of its origins, which, were both kind of internal and external. Internally, just an unacceptably high rate of officer suicide. And externally, these, major news events. And so there was a lot of pressure that was kind of coming both from inside and outside. And it's interesting because, firefighters don't quite have that same relationship to the out, they're I don't know if it's just more supported, or they don't kind of end up in that same sort of bad guy role sometimes in the news, but they don't
Yep.
have that same kind of external pressure to change, and so it ends up being a little bit more internally driven for them. So there's just some differences, a lot of differences between the two, but some similarities.
Yeah, I think the similarity is that there's going to be cumulative trauma.
Yeah.
There's going to be cumulative stress load that stacks, and that you have to, in some way, manage. And I
Yeah.
think when we can manage that, this is why I love teaching ORSM, that this method of stacking protocols together in a very intentional way to address the stress response in a specific way for specific experiences. And I just was interesting you bring up fire, because I just put together a beta tested fire series for ORSM, and I sent it to a chief friend, and also talking to another friend who's on Denver PD, whose brother works for Denver Fire.
Mm-hmm.
And then going with a buddy of mine today for coffee, and he's Denver Fire as well. Because I think, like, as whether you're in whatever first response you're in,
Yeah.
law enforcement, fire, EMS, the cursory stuff that surrounds that, you're going to have that trauma stack. And if you don't address it, it has a biological effect on your body,
Yeah.
and it's going to take its toll. But if you do address it, well, then you have that stress load management, nervous system regulation in check that gives you access to emotional intelligence
Mm-hmm.
and allows you to have those conversations a little bit more freely and have that empathy for somebody that you're contacting who's having a bad day.
Yeah. Yeah, I have, as a civilian, people, sometimes ask or wonder, like how do are you accepted in the field? Like, are you, is that a huge barrier? And, there's almost nothing I ever talk about has to do with the responsibilities. Like, I'm the last person in the world you want to learn from about shooting a gun or, or like chasing somebody or wrestling. I'm like, don't touch me, no, just you stay over there. And so, when it comes to those, and even including the general population, I mean, just remembering that we all have these human bodies that respond to these events, and those bodies don't know what kind of badge you're wearing, or whether you're wearing a badge at all, or whether it's trauma from poverty, or childhood versus something older. It's just it's helpful just being able to talk about these things. It helps people to understand them in themselves and in their bodies. It helps them be able to how they raise their kids. And I love hearing stories about the way people are able to help their children essentially regulate in ways that we just never knew how, as we were when we were younger, or for such a long time. And of course, there's all these natural things that are naturally regulating, like go play outside, like it worked for a reason.
Right. It's so interesting. I mean,
I need someone to yell that to me every day.
Well, you find yourself now, I see this because you, again, if you're not following Katie on LinkedIn, follow her on LinkedIn, because go find her on there. It's a combination of amazing wellness stuff, gratitude about this community that she's a part of and that I'm a part of, and nature. And I love seeing the nature posts because it is so true. Getting out there in nature, finding these things that we can do outside of the work that totally regulate us. Absolutely. I love it. Have you always been into nature, into being outside? Like, where does that love of hiking and being in the what did somebody say the other day? You're hippie, doing the hippie shit you like to do.
Yeah. Oh yeah, my hippie shit. Outside. Surprised me. Along the river is what they said. So, yeah, and honestly it came from, I think, one of the and this it's kind of it's a it's a long string of an answer, but it's like, if you're going, why are you the way you are, a big part of it is because of grief. I mean, I had a lot of loss, like at a very formulative age, early, that I never really learned how to, well, and my recovery from that grief process was interrupted by additional trauma. And so it took me a really long time. So I carried a lot of grief for a long time, and it took me a really long time to learn and teach myself really to be able to kind of grieve in a healthy way. And I still think that a lot of people that we just don't have very healthy relationships with grief anymore. It's one of the reasons why I really love talking about it. But the first time that the first time I really grieved something in a way, and I like to say that grief is either one of the most creative or destructive forces on earth, depending on what you do with it. And I mean, there are temples that were built. I mean, like there have been amazing things that have been accomplished, with grief at its root. And so when my dog Dorothy died unexpectedly at age 8 in 2019, I mean, I was just devastated. And it was like a week in the hospital, not knowing if she's gonna make it or not, $8,000 that I didn't have. And she had a sister who I still had. And so, after that ended, me and Oki started taking Sunday pup ventures, and we would just go to different parks every week, and we did that for the next 6 years until Oki passed away. And then when Oki passed away, then I kept going by myself. And the way that I think that there are really amazing ways to spend time in nature with other people. And I'm probably at a bit of a being a little chronically single, maybe at a disadvantage. Maybe I'm just saying this for my own sake, but to be able to sort of just really connect and I don't want to call someone else a distraction, but to just be there and there's nothing but the river and the trees and the wind. Like it really, it's healed me in so many ways. And, nature's really just been a big part of my grief journey and my processing journey. And it's how I, learned how to kind of take what I was feeling and walk it, just kind of walk it out. And it's been, and I'm really lucky too, because I live just one block down from a beautiful park in Indianapolis. And I've been in this house for over 10 years. And so I've always had a lot of just kind of beautiful access to the outdoors. And it's just been a really amazing way for me to process whatever's been going on.
I love the fact that here's another example of a traumatic experience. So this is, you hear this saying, life happens to me, or life happens for me, not to me, right? And this is another example of that, where you have a life experience that's happening for you, and and it pivots you in a direction to take this other dog out on these walks and really start connecting. And it becomes this healing thing that is so impactful in your life that still continues to this day. And I love hearing those stories of those moments that we think that we don't see the wisdom in right away.
Yeah.
And we can look back now and see the wisdom. I mean, that's why they say hindsight's 2020. And I think like what I always try to say is like, how can I make hindsight as narrow as possible?
Yeah.
So that I can get to that wisdom as fast as possible.
Yeah. Well, and the grief never stopped. I mean, the things didn't stop happening. I just had a better way to deal with them. So, I lost my dad 4 years ago. I lost my other dog. I lost my friend Dan. So there's kind of, and I always think grief is really layered, and they say that grief for one thing kind of brings on grief for everything. I can't think about one dog without thinking about the other dog, without thinking about my dad, without thinking about Dan.
Yes.
But so it helped me. It was a tool. It was something that was there for me once I learned to use it. Which is how I like to kind of pose all of this stuff that we're teaching. Like, you don't necessarily know when, especially if you're new in law enforcement, you hear someone talking about these critical incidents, you hear about the thing, but you don't know when that first one's going to come. Hopefully, people are starting to assume it's most likely going to happen, but there are smaller towns. It's not necessarily going to happen to everybody at the same pace, but it's like, here's this tool, and that's all it is. And it's not necessarily I don't want to even say it's overly positive or it's overly negative. It is what you make of it. It's something to use and try, and maybe it'll work for you. Maybe something else is a better fit.
Yeah, I love that. I love that openness and that idea of just curiosity. I think those are two of the biggest things. Two of the biggest things that I've learned in my life is lead with curiosity and take the action to create validation for oneself. I say this a lot because when you do that, life gets a lot more fun, and you can see that again. You can see the wisdom, I think, a lot quicker. You mentioned again, like early, like coming into this career, and we talked about it. You teaching at the academy. I know it's something that I'm trying to get into different academies in this area, my system in there as well. So cadets have these tools right away to choose from, right? They can start to put them in their tool bag and talk about that experience. One, like what impact do you think that has immediately on those?
Well, the work that I've done out there has grown a lot. I think it started in 2020, and it started just as yoga classes. And so early on, I was kind of a break from PT, and also preferable to getting having a super, super hard workout that day. And, but that was also early on in my own teaching. And I wanted to make sure I had some teaching experience under my belt before working with law enforcement. I don't like it when people just, go from no yoga teaching experience to now I'm going to work with this group of, trauma, impacted personnel, because there's a lot of space that's necessary. Curiosity, you said that earlier, inviting in a sense of curiosity about what you're feeling, inviting a sense of openness about what you're feeling. So my own teachings developed a lot. So it started as that kind of immediate yes, because it wasn't a hard PT session, and then over the years, when I became a meditation and mindfulness teacher, then I started adding meditation and mindfulness into the classes. I had already kind of been adding breath work into the classes. So it started as kind of a PT. And so it was really early in the morning, like 5:30 in the morning. Still, and loved it, loved doing it. And then I was really grateful when they asked me if I wanted to do the officer wellness lecture. And I was like, absolutely, give it to me, please. Yeah. Because all of the things that we were doing in physical training and in yoga and meditation, like they all have so much more to do. It's like we want people to understand, like it's not just a practice and it's not just a choice. And I know a lot of people are going to leave there and never do yoga again. This is why we're doing it, and why it's effective in your body. And so then I'd get to start teaching nervous system regulation, essentially as soon as I was able to do the officer wellness lecture. And then when I became a certified CISM teacher, then they asked me to take on the critical incidents course, and I was like, absolutely yes.
Wow.
And then I got to layer kind of my version of critical incidents on top of this work that we'd been doing in the gym, and work that we'd been doing in the officer wellness lecture. And so it all sort of layered on top of each other. And so I think one neat story from recently, it was with a tier 2 class. And so most of them were going to pretty small departments or hospital departments, and they had their final that day. And so they were kind of nervous about that. I had a little bit more time scheduled for class than I had expected. And so I was just like, I'm not going to try to take all this time, so you can go study. And someone was like, oh, can we do yoga? And I was just laughing, like, well, I'll offer some meditation and breath work after we finish if you want that before class. And to my surprise, half of the class stayed. And I was just, I couldn't believe it. They could go. They were free to go, totally dismissed, and they stuck around. And so, I think more than anything, if there's one thing that I hope people understand and take away more than anything else, is that you have so much more control over how you feel than you might have previously given yourself credit for. And that, it might be, you might forget some of this stuff, and you might not remember it kind of from an academic standpoint, and you might not remember all of the techniques, but if you ever start noticing some of that stuff, some of that dysregulation, those things we talked about, the things that are kind of sticking in your head, that there's this, oh, but there's something I can do about it, and from there you can go and Google. I don't expect anybody to just, encyclopedia, have an encyclopedia memory of everything that I'm teaching there. So I have a motto when it comes to any kind of teaching, and I've had this actually since before working with law enforcement: teach it like they'll never hear it again. And so, I beg literally people not to drink alcohol after critical incidents. I'm like, if for no reason other than the interruption to your sleep cycle where you most need to process what happened from there. If I'm not completely ragging on alcohol, even though I don't drink it for good reasons, but yeah, so it's just trying. It sometimes feels like jumping up and down, just so in case there's something that they'll remember later on.
I love that. I love the teach it like they're never going to hear it again. Man, that's so powerful, because it's the same. Like in ORSM, there's 36 in the core series that I teach. there's 36 stacks and 12 protocols that are combined in very specific ways. And I say, like in my training, take two of these, take one of these, and just start running it. Just start getting reps with one and see how it works. And you don't need the 30, you don't need 36. I'm gonna show you them. You're gonna have access to them, but take one or two and just start running it because doing anything is better than doing nothing.
Yeah.
And um, you know, the fact that that we do have control over our systems way more than we think.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about this a lot too. It's like take control back of that mental spiraling, of that, sympathetic activation, of the body bracing happens. You know, you can affect that stuff. And I love it. And I love that you say that yoga is like a reprieve from a hard workout because my experience with yoga has been it's been one of the most difficult things that I've done. I have a great yoga teacher out of Houston. He teaches Himalayan Hatha yoga, and it's awesome, but it's hard.
Oh, and there's plenty of complaining even during yoga. I mean, like, I am like plank, long line from your shoulders to your heels, like, and it looks like a bunch of downward dogs, and so, so there's definitely, but it's like afterwards. I think one of the nice things about yoga, and I've always sort of said this for myself, I'm pretty picky about what I like myself. But it's like no matter what happened in yoga, when it kind of ends with a shavasana, just that kind of quiet period at the end, it's like everything else is okay. And we don't do necessarily a shavasana in the academy. What I'll do is I'll get everybody down on their backs, and then we just do a few rounds of the breath work that we've been practicing. I mean, I'd have a hard time, like, not, I'm sure that they'd be fine if I'd explain it, but, we're in an academy. I mean, I want to make sure to keep it, to use the time that I have to be continuing to practice, some of those other skills, too. So, but yeah, no, it can be hard and it can be challenging, but I definitely don't try to make it a super, all of the yoga that I teach, whether it's to law enforcement personnel or in my community, is just very accessible. And that's important to me.
Totally important. And I think you're really tracking with like keeping it more, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's like keeping things more tactical than more like maybe traditional yoga where they might get caught up in the wording that and feel like, oh, this is too woo woo. And where no, like really what this is just tactical breathing or it's tactical awareness, that you're turning from outside inward.
Yeah.
And I try to use a lot of that same language
Yeah.
to keep it very tactical. Why I named tactical resilience. Like this is very much about utilizing it on duty. It's very much about like now the aperture of adoption is wide open. Like you can apply these things to many different pillars of operational experience, but I try to keep it, away from the. And I don't know why there's such a stigma around some of the more woo-woo stuff because it's so useful. But I think some of this stuff also is tip of the spear, even though we've been doing it and working with it for many years. For 80% of the people out there, and I was talking to that fire chief the other day, he's like 80 to 90% of the people don't know about this stuff and they're not using it.
Yeah.
And like, so I think if we can bring it to a place that is, I love that you say like more useful and just very practical.
Practical is how I would describe it. Practical, plain, it's kind of no frills.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
And I
straightforward.
don't mind the other, other types. And, I think that it's interesting as a teacher, being able to balance sort of like that deep appreciation for the whole spectrum of what yoga is and means. It's philosophy. It's, that it's not just this series of, movements, but, something much more. And to be able to like both balance that, but also, kind of create a welcome mat to the practice, and that's what I'm most concerned about. We always have opportunities, or people can deepen, their yoga practice, their knowledge of it as it goes. But how is anyone supposed to kind of come to a practice if you don't understand half the words that a teacher is saying, or that the postures
Yeah,
are something that feel
exactly.
inaccessible to you? And so, and there are people for that, and those people are awesome. And I hope
I
that
think,
people go on to find them. That's just not me.
yeah, I think that like what you're doing in that sense is you're just providing a door. You're
Hmm.
like, hey, here's the door. Like it's open for you. And
Yeah.
you open the door and there's going to be some people that take it and they go down a different path with it. Some people are just going to stand in the door, and that's fine too. And there's some people that are going to take pieces of it. Because I think some of the best stuff that I've gotten from yoga is body awareness, it's breathing regulation, it's really just situational awareness, which is so critical to law enforcement.
Yeah.
And so both internal and
Exactly.
external,
Hmm.
because you're being internally situationally aware, like how am I feeling? How's my mindset and my internal resilience working? And then externally, you're like, okay, I need to be looking this way and up, not hunching my shoulders, or I can move my leg a little bit more this way. So you have this external awareness as well, which is so also critical in
Yeah.
law enforcement. I love the door that you're providing.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah. And we specifically, one of my sessions is always focused on exteroception and interoception.
mhm,
So we very
yeah.
specifically talk about that. And, one of my favorite examples for talking about exteroception is, have you ever been going up a staircase and you miss a stair, or you trip when you go
Ooh,
down? And it's like
yep,
who hasn't experienced that? You think that the stair is right here and that your foot's going to land on it, and it just doesn't for whatever reason. Like that
right.
is, or not exteroception, proprioception, I'm sorry. Yeah, and then in that same practice, in that same class that we do with every class, then it's followed by probably about a 15-20 minute body scan meditation. And I love doing those meditations with the cadets, and I love hearing the feedback from it. And it's always it's just always something that's really, really neat. And it's so important to be able to listen to those internal, those internal messages that our body is sending
No.
us, and to know, okay, this, I think I probably need to go to the doctor for this one. And it's amazing how many people will put something like that off and off and off and off for until it's too late.
So much. That's so important. And I love that you say that because it is building skill that is so much bigger than what they might think early on like that they're building, because they are getting this awareness that they are going to have about themselves, and being conscious of that. Yeah, handle these things early. Getting in and out of a police vehicle with a weighted, you know, duty belt on and all of this gear for 5, 10, 15, sometimes 30 years, you have to be, it's going to take a toll. And you have to be mindful of the movement of your body. That was one thing that I was really like, um, as a, as somebody that was an officer safety trainer, physical methods of arrest, enhanced officer safety instructor, like I was very conscious of that stuff and would spin in a certain way instead of twisting out of my car, and had these little ways of standing up from a desk or standing up from my locker or wherever, that were better than the twist and move that I knew and I saw around that we're having a challenge, we're challenging some people that have been on longer.
Yeah. It's yeah, no, I mean, so it's and with the yoga practice too, as both I don't have any sort of official certification or anything in somatics, but my yoga teacher, incorporated a lot, and but it also includes mindfulness during the yoga practice, and somatics. And for me, I think that especially like when in a trauma affected population, and again, as a very trauma affected person, I mean, I had a kind of broken brain for a really long time. And so much of this stuff is things that I've been kind of slowly piecing together, and not even over that long. I mean, really over about 7 or 8 years. And that sense, I think one of the reasons I had been practicing yoga for a really long time, and I think that it was before I knew anything else, it was the one thing that gave me this sense of like agency in my body. And I didn't realize that it felt so good because it was my mat, and it was my breath, and it was my body, and it was my practice. And being able to being able to help people kind of really feel, you can get deeply disconnected from your own body. And so and all of those practices just help to kind of reacquaint yourself and make it your body not just a tool, but kind of your friend. And something that will protect you and make you strong and give you what you need to survive. We've really just got this one. So we've got to take good care of them, especially when it's so important, like in a job like law enforcement.
I agree. I want to make a distinction here too, because I think like people, I know I did this as well, and this is why it stands out to me. You mentioned feeling like you had this broken brain for a long time, and I felt like a broken individual in many ways after 8 years in this job. And I want people to hear that if you feel that, I get it, Katie gets it, but it's biology. It's not. It's biology of cumulative stress and trauma that we just haven't processed. We're not broken individuals. We're not unable to put ourselves back together. We can absolutely do that. It's not a weakness. And I would tell people out there that are feeling that they're not broken. They're just regulated and they're overwhelmed, because if you don't deal with that trauma and that cumulative load biologically, it is going to have an effect on your brain. It's going to have an effect on your body. And I so want people to hear that, because I felt that for so many years, feeling this like I was alone, I was broken, I didn't know what to do. And there's things out there that you can do. And I know you can reach out to me. I know you can reach out to Katie if you're feeling that. And I like to make that distinction, because I don't want people to stay stuck in that.
Recovery is always possible, and that's why giving people that sort of agency and putting it back in their hands is so important. Well, what's been interesting over the past year is that I never really suspected it until I did, and then I went and got kind of a battery of testing done. I have what I call ADHD AF. I tested between 95 and 98, and I know that I've had it my entire life. And so like I had kind of a severe ADHD and didn't realize it until the last year. And so it's interesting because my mindfulness practice, when I say my brain was broken, and I definitely respect your point. It was severe ADHD, which I don't take medication for now. I've learned, I learned, this is just kind of how it works. And then also trauma on top of that. And so all of a sudden, when I learned mindfulness, and I learned how to direct my attention and be able to bring my attention back, and more than anything, stop beating myself up constantly Constantly. I was just, I'm like, I thought I was so dumb. I thought I was a bad person. I thought I was, so it was when I say broken brain, that's mostly what I mean is that the stories in my head were so
Yes.
freaking mean to myself.
Yeah.
And so, and I fixed it and went from, and mostly thankful to mindfulness, which I thought was just like, oh, here's just mindfulness. And then it turns out it probably had a lot to do with ADHD. Taught me, and it's one thing more than anything, and I love, this is one of the reasons I love teaching mindfulness to law enforcement, is that, you know, it's not that it's just about just concentrating. It's about recognizing when you've wandered, and with a sense of kindness toward yourself to bring your attention back. And so my internal story started going from, you know, doing something, getting distracted, you suck, you're the worst, ugh, you're, you know, bad person, stupid, all of this stuff, to going, it's okay, just start again. It's okay, just start again. And when you take that story in your head, it's okay just to, you know, and just start again and apply it to anything you want to do. Like, I mean, just the progress that I've made. I always was smart and productive and kind and, you know, doing all of this stuff. But the progress I made, and my ability to kind of follow up and to keep these things going that were not just like, because as a PIO, it was actually pretty helpful for my brain to have the constant like notifications. I never had to get bored. I never had anything. It was just I constantly knew what to do. It was like a fire hose, and I just had to constantly like manage that fire hose. And then when I switched jobs and you know, came into this role where there wasn't really a terrain set, there wasn't really people who I knew who could kind of tell me what to do. I was just sort of figuring it out, and being able, you know, in that mindfulness practice, and being able to kind of, without the external, you know, the fire hose in my face, without just the constant chaos, to still being able to move forward and making progress and stay on track. Oh my gosh. And I'd say the biggest difference is that I went from being my worst enemy, which I absolutely was. I mean, it kills me how poorly I thought of myself for such a long time, to being my own biggest cheerleader. And, you know, that's dangerous for other people, because it's like I am on my side, right? I am not, it's not stubbornness, it's not backing down. It is a true belief in myself and in my intention and in my ability. And you know, and that is something I developed.
Mm-hmm. I love all of this. And I think, like, okay, just let's bring the connection in here. Late life, diagnosed ADHD.
Yeah,
was on medication for a little while. Didn't like I liked the effect, but I didn't like the side effect.
Yeah.
And so I got off medication, transitioned to nootropics and different like natural supplements.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of the biggest things for me, because I had all that same stuff you're talking about, I was my own worst enemy. My internal like dialogue was just so fucked up about myself. And I was right. I was telling myself I was broken. I was unsuccessful. Now, in the meantime, I was doing all of these great things. I just couldn't see the forest through the trees because of it. And when I first learned about, like, I got this book called Driven to Distraction, and it talked about ADHD, and there was like 20 or something points that they list that are ADHD symptoms. I had 20 of them.
Yeah.
Like, it was everything. But what that did for me was it realigned it gave me language to talk through these things and to understand them. And then also the book, what it did was it told me about the positive, right? Why could I sit in front of, you know, for many years I was a tattooer. Why could I sit in front of a client for 5 hours and be locked in to that tattoo and do the best work that I could do? Why could I paint for hours and hours and lose track of time? Because I had this superpower.
Yeah.
So it realigned my idea around what ADHD was for me, and it became more of I became more of an advocate for myself and for those qualities that I could like lean into.
Yeah.
So I love that you're saying this. And I think the mindfulness was really super important for me too. Meditation, where you are, let's say, just focusing on the breath, and then your mind wanders and you're not focused on the breath. Well, then you come back to it, and instead of beating yourself up about it, just like you're grateful that you have the basis and the awareness to go, oh wow, I was thinking about something else. Now I'm thinking about the breath again. Cool. Let me focus on the breath. Then you go off onto something else, and you're like, oh wait, I should be thinking about my breath. Amazing. I'm grateful that I could think back to that I have to work on the breath.
Yeah.
And this, like, instead of, oh man, I was thinking about something else. I better get back to the breath. Okay, I'm on the breath. I'm on the breath. I'm not on the breath. Ah, shit. I got to be coming back to the breath. And this shift in idea that you could be grateful about, that I even have the basis to come back to the breath.
Yeah.
It was amazingly helpful for me. Now, here is the big unlock that happened for me. And this was recent, 2023, or I think 2023, I did this program. Highly recommend it for anybody that has ADHD. Brain Highways. 9 weeks, one of the hardest things I ever did, because it takes, it's not only knowledge based, but it is activity based, where you're doing these very specific ground movements, and you're doing this very specific creeping on your stomach and then crawling on your hands and knees. This is developing the mid and lower brain. And I came out of that 9 weeks a different person. I mean, it's like if you were to go to the gym for 9 weeks and just strictly focused on it, your body would come out different. My brain came out different. And I've talked to CEOs that I've worked for and family that know me for, my whole life. And he's like, you're not the same.
Yeah.
You articulate different, you express different. And it was one, okay, I always start that sentence. It's the most impactful thing I ever did for personal development.
Yeah. I've never heard of it. I'm grateful to hear about it.
It's great program. I did the adult program. They have a child program as well. Again, get ready for a difficult experience, but one of the most impactful that you can have. And there's a book out there too called Connection Mode. And I learned, like, in that course, like, my body, my nervous system was running on idle all the time. This is why I love what I teach, because it is nervous system regulation. You can regulate that. You can take control of it. And some of the same things I learned in that program I teach today, like bilateral tapping.
Yeah.
Just is so amazing. And it sounds crazy, looks weird sometimes, but super easy, no equipment needed. You can definitely stack it with some other protocols, and have an incredible experience getting yourself into this parasympathetic edge.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot about what my life might have been like if I had learned, any of this at like age 15, which was
Wow,
sort of
right?
when my trauma journey, started. And I'm grateful in retrospect that everything happened, because just the fact that I get to be here, like on this podcast, talking about this stuff. I mean, I still sometimes don't understand why anyone even listens to me on all of this. I'm like, it's so weird. I'm a civilian, right? Like, but it's incredible. I mean, those tools and how accessible they are, and same thing with the breath. I mean, like the power of our breath, like for that sort of, just power of even understanding that we have a sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And I mean, those are just, it's stuff everybody should know. And I still think we're pretty far away from that, even at a school level, which just doesn't make which doesn't make any sense to me. You know, when I teach mindfulness to law enforcement, which I think that it's one of those things. I think it's a skill that I don't know anyone. I love teaching it because it's so universal. I don't know anyone who wouldn't benefit from the practice. And when I teach it, I always tell them, I'm like, look, we're not meditating for the sake of meditating. Like, nobody's gonna care if you meditate. Like, I've meditated for hundreds and hundreds of hours. Nobody cares. People are gonna care if you pay attention to them. And your kids are going to care if you pay attention to them, and your spouse, and you have this very limited amount of time on earth with the people that you love the most, and you hope that it's going to be the most time ever, but you don't know. And so, like, when you are with your people and the people that you love the most, or when you're with your friends, or when you're playing basketball, or you're at church, or you're doing whatever it is, be there. Like, and not looking at people you don't like on Facebook. Not just completely distracted. And one of the other lines that I use a lot is, don't be at work in your head when you're not getting paid for it. You know what I mean? Like, you've got this very limited amount of time with these people you love, and you're like working for free in your brain. Like, spend that time. And mindfulness it helps you recognize, oh man, like, I'm here, I'm distracted, someone I love very, 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 very much is in front of me, and I need to pay attention to that person.
And I think that is so critical to the nervous system regulation stuff that can allow us access to that awareness.
Definitely.
And that emotional intelligence to say, hey, okay, hold on, let's stop this mental spiral. It's why I have one of the pillars in ORSM that is about mental spiraling, because it happens to everybody, not just law enforcement. And you can interrupt that. You can interrupt it, and you can have the surplus and the capacity and energy to focus on those loved ones and the activities that you're doing and what I call the outer wellness. So I love we're speaking the same language.
Yeah.
It's so much.
Well, and again, as a single, I laugh how much I end up talking about relationships and marriage and how important they are, and time with children, despite the fact that, I don't have those, which I think is related in large part to my own trauma, journey, hyper independence and stuff like that. But I mean, it is so, families and the people we love are so absolutely critical for recovery from those unavoidable traumatic events. And so it's like, we've got to, where we can avoid causing problems, like not paying attention to our family, letting the relationships that are most important to us deteriorate, infidelity, all of this other, destroying, this most important unit that's going to help you be able to bounce back from the things that you can't control, that are just part of the job. And so it's like, just helping people realize, like, again, it goes back to that agency and like what's in your control and what's not, and stop floating through life acting like everything is just up to someone else or to some force that's outside of you. We each are have these lives that we get to create and make our own. And law enforcement is such a cool, awesome profession. I mean, it is such a neat job, and it comes with so many huge responsibilities and also so many cool opportunities. So to be able to focus on those opportunities and provide yourself with the tools you need to get through the hard days, it's just, I don't know. So people need to hear it.
Hey, Carlson, dropping bombs today. I mean, I love it. It is so true. And this is about ownership. Mm-hmm. And I'm in so many conversations in my DMs about with officers about this negative talking about their admin and about their leader and about their shift and about their situation and about their department. And I'm like, friends, do you not realize that your brain is going to look for the negative if you keep talking about the negative? But if you shift that and you flip it and you start talking about the positive and you start finding those things, that's what your brain's going to look for. And that's what's going to show up in life and come back to you. Yeah. And so you can take ownership of that. Life is not, again, happening to you, it's happening for you. So if you have a situation that's difficult in your department, man, lead where your 2 feet stand, take ownership of it, and throw your hat in the ring on how to solve that problem. Don't just talk shit about it at coffee and before briefing and in the locker room and off duty, because that's not doing anything. And so,
No, and it's
um,
also dragging down the people around you, frankly. With mirroring, or if the other people, if you are surrounded by people that are complaining all the time and all that, it has an impact on you.
it
And
does.
you have to it ends up being a choice at the end of the day. Do you want to be in the cool people that love their job club, or the mad people that complain about everything club? And like, who you're around or who you choose to be and show up in each of these moments is a choice.
It is absolutely a choice. And, again, you said it perfectly. Do you want to be in this club or do you want to be in this club? Because you can have influence. You can either be influenced or
Mm-hmm.
you can be the influencer.
Mm-hmm.
And if you choose to take ownership and leadership, and regulate yourself so you have that capacity, then you can be the leader there. You can throw your hat in the ring and you can say, you know what, I am here for change,
Mm-hmm.
not just out on the street, but inside my own department.
Yeah.
And it's critical that in the way that policing is now, and so much that the job has changed, it's critical for those older officers and the newer officers to take that ownership and take that control and be the influencers. Um, I love it, Katie. If you were going to, I want to just talk a little bit programming and your vision for wellness in a department the size that you run, and how you approach that.
Yeah.
Just to give some ideas to anybody that's listening to this that wants to start a wellness program in their department, or is, maybe struggling with how the direction they want to take it. What was your approach to that, and what do you see that's working?
I have an article that should be coming out in May, through Police Chief Magazine, that's called a rising, and it was an accident. You're gonna love this title. Like, it was total accident, like, wrote the wrong word. I wrote a rising tide lifts all shifts.
Love that.
And
I
we
say
and
that a lot.
and we kept it. And so, and I think that that's how it is. So my vision is, if you don't know where to start, find somebody who does. If someone won't talk to you, that person's gonna like move on, find someone else who will. And don't try to do any of it. Don't try to do any of it alone. We've got to stop reinventing the wheel in every single organization, and we've got to stop leaving people behind. And so, like, as people are developing these wellness programs, we need to be reaching out to smaller agencies, neighboring agencies, surrounding agencies. One of the examples that was used in the article, that'll be coming out, is from North Dakota, and they're doing some really great work there. Or is it South Dakota? I'm spacing, but hours and hours between the cities, right? And between these towns. And, if there's someone responding, there are small towns responding too. So if your people aren't, if you're responding with other agencies, and, it's all the same scene, then everybody should be getting access to the same kind of support, both before and after an incident. So yeah, no, just absolutely do not go alone. I hope that eventually, and this is not necessarily what I found, but I hope that eventually it becomes just like massively uncool to not like pull everybody else up with you,
Yeah.
and that, like, they, and that it's just a natural thing to do. And so, we're working on it. Here I have just had such, I mean, for the most rich part of but probably the richest part of my work is getting to help and serve people. And when you get to know that you make a difference. And the second is more selfish, and it has so much more to do with the connectivity and with those relationships that I've developed both through LinkedIn, both here in Indiana. And it was hard and it takes work, but but what my friend said in the article was that even like these chiefs in tiny towns in the middle of nowhere knew that they needed to do something with wellness. Like they're like, this is something, but they didn't know where to start. And so we've just so the analogy that I made in the article is essentially more of like a net that can lift everybody up and nodes. And there's still room and roles for these kinds of rock star agencies and chiefs and people who are really supporting it and really behind it. Like, you still shine, but you lift up people more than just your agency, because when we talk about law enforcement wellness, most of it is a culture issue, and culture does not stop at jurisdictional borders. I mean, it goes it goes across. So we've just got to stop treating it that way, and we can get so much more done when we're all working together. And I think just the isolation of trying to start a wellness program from scratch, like feeling like you're having to reinvent, like that is dysregulating, and it's completely unnecessary. And so, if someone won't talk to you, find someone else who will, and then take that and find 5 other agencies that are interested in it and work on it all together, because that network and kind of being in community with each other and being able to support each other on the good days and the bad days, to be able to train and create opportunities and create networks and connections, but also be able to respond to each other's critical incidents or provide support to somebody if they don't have a formal team. So I don't have very many, technically it's going to look different for absolutely everybody, depending on what resources available, what, people are available, but like, just don't do it by yourself. And it's so much better not to.
I love that. Thank you so much for that insight. I think this is why people are attracted to what you're doing over there, and why it's making a difference, because it is purpose driven. It's meaningful work, and you have a heart for it. And so I so appreciate it. You coming on and sharing your experience, being open and vulnerable to just sharing your story. I think it's super impactful, and more people can learn from it and grow from it and be inspired by it. And so thank you so much for being a part of the podcast, and for the connection that we've had on LinkedIn and here.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. This conversation was such a pleasure. And, as you said earlier, I love to connect with people, and, from wherever. I talk to people all the time. I'm a very easy person to hop on a phone or some messages with. And so if anyone wants to, please get a hold of me.
Yeah, amazing. Well, go find Katie on LinkedIn. Definitely reach out, make that connection. She's an invaluable resource in this space, and somebody to really watch and follow, and again, be inspired by. So, and look, if you have interest in learning some of these techniques, obviously the Tactical Resilience Workshop is available. This is where you're going to learn ORSM, Operational Reset Stack Method, is a stack-based human behavior performance system that you can apply to all things you're doing in law enforcement. This is not just a single wellness tool. The power in this, in the way that I built it, is that one tool is good. Stacking these tools together is even more powerful. And so hit me up, Joe Swanson Tactical on Instagram. DM me baseline if you want to, or just reach out. If you want a couple of these protocols to test out, if your department wants to bring me in, just reach out. Let's have that conversation. And I appreciate everybody listening. Thank you so much. Share this with a friend. It means a lot to me and helps get this word out. And so thank you again, Katie, for coming on. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.